Baby Bobcat won't stop following Officer. When he finds out why, he breaks down in tears. The morning mist clung to the pines like gossamer, casting an ethereal glow across the winding road that cut through Pine Hollow, Montana. Officer Daniel Morrison's patrol car crept along the damp asphalt, his experienced eyes scanning the treeline for any signs of trouble. 23 years on the force had taught him that dawn patrols often brought the unexpected, but nothing could have prepared him for what this particular morning would bring. The first rays of sunlight were just beginning to pierce through the canopy when he spotted something unusual in the middle of the road. A small, tawny figure, no larger than a house cat, standing defiantly in his path. Daniel eased his foot onto the brake, squinting through the windshield at what he quickly recognized as a juvenile bobcat. Its distinctive tufted ears and stubby tail were unmistakable, but what struck him most was its behavior. Instead of darting away at the approach of his vehicle, the bobcat remained fixed in place, its eyes locked on Daniel's with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. In his nearly quarter-century of service in this mountainous region, he'd encountered plenty of wildlife, but never had he seen a wild animal display such deliberate attention. "Well, little fellow," Daniel murmured to himself, reaching for his radio, "what's got you so worked up this morning?" He knew protocol called for animal control in situations like these, but something about the bobcat's demeanor gave him pause. Its movement seemed purposeful, almost desperate, as it paced back and forth across the road, occasionally looking back toward the dense forest beyond. Daniel stepped out of his cruiser, keeping a cautious distance. The morning air bit at his cheeks, carrying with it the sharp scent of pine and wet earth. The bobcat's behavior grew more animated at his appearance, its small frame trembling with what seemed less like fear and more like urgency. "I must be losing my mind," Daniel muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. The bobcat took a few steps toward the forest, then turned back to face him, letting out a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a mewl. It repeated this motion, and Daniel felt an inexplicable pull to follow. His radio crackled to life. "Dispatch to Unit 17, checking on your status, over." Daniel hesitated for a moment before responding. "Unit 17 to dispatch. I'm investigating a possible wildlife situation off Mountain Creek Road. Will advise if assistance is needed. Over." The bobcat led him deeper into the forest, occasionally pausing to ensure he was still following. Daniel's hand rested instinctively on his service weapon, though his gut told him this wasn't a threat situation. The forest floor was slick with morning dew, and the undergrowth grew denser with each step. After about 15 minutes of this unusual procession, Daniel heard something that made him freeze, a weak human voice calling out. The bobcat's pace quickened, and Daniel broke into a careful run, following the sound and his unlikely guide. In a small clearing, partially sheltered by a fallen log, lay a man in his early 30s. His clothes were torn and dirty, his face pale beneath several days' worth of beard growth. But what caught Daniel's attention immediately was the badly broken leg, crudely splinted with branches and strips torn from a backpack. "Oh God! Thank God," the man croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was going to die out here." Daniel rushed to the man's side, already calling for emergency services on his radio. "Sir, I'm Officer Daniel Morrison. Can you tell me your name?" Ryan Porter," the man managed, his eyes following the bobcat as it circled them anxiously. "You won't believe this, but that cat, she's been keeping me alive." As Daniel worked to assess Ryan's condition and relay coordinates to the incoming rescue team, the story emerged in fragments. Ryan, an experienced hiker from Bristol, England, had been exploring the backcountry when he lost his footing on a steep incline. The fall had left him with a compound fracture and no way to call for help. His phone had been crushed in the fall. "She found me that first night," Ryan explained, his voice growing stronger as Daniel shared his water supply. I was going into shock, I think. The temperature was dropping fast. She just curled up against me. Keeps me warm. His eyes welled with tears. Every morning, she'd disappear for a while and come back with rabbits or squirrels. Raw meat isn't exactly my usual diet, but he managed a weak laugh. Beggars can't be choosers. Daniel noticed something glinting around the bobcat's neck, a silver pendant on a leather cord. Ryan followed his gaze. That's mine. I had this mad idea that if she was going to keep coming back, maybe someone would notice it. Took me hours to convince her to let me put it on her. The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air, and the bobcat retreated to the edge of the clearing, watching intently as the rescue team arrived. Daniel found himself fighting back tears as he helped transfer Ryan onto a stretcher, the full weight of what had transpired hitting him. A wild animal, acting against every natural instinct, had not only kept a human alive, but had actively sought help. The story of the Pine Hollow bobcat spread like wildfire, first through the local media, then nationally, and finally internationally. Ryan's recovery at St. Patrick's Hospital in Missoula became a minor media sensation, with reporters and wildlife experts all clamoring to understand this extraordinary case of interspecies cooperation. Dr. Sarah Matthews, a wildlife behavioral specialist from the University of Montana, spent weeks studying the phenomenon. What makes this case so remarkable, she explained in one of many interviews, is not just that the bobcat helped keep Mr. Porter alive, but that it actively sought human assistance. This suggests a level of cognitive sophistication and emotional intelligence that challenges our understanding of wildlife behavior. Ryan's recovery was slow but steady. The compound fracture required multiple surgeries, and physical therapy would be a long-term commitment. But throughout his hospital stay, he had an unusual visitor. The bobcat, whom Ryan had named Grace, would appear regularly at the edge of the hospital grounds, visible from his third-floor window. Hospital administration, initially alarmed by the presence of a wild predator, worked with local wildlife authorities to establish an unprecedented protocol. Under careful supervision, Grace was allowed controlled visits to the hospital's private garden area, where Ryan would be wheeled out during his recovery. It defies everything we know about bobcat behavior, admitted Dr. James Harrison, the hospital's chief of medicine. But we couldn't ignore the therapeutic benefits. Mr. Porter's recovery rates improved significantly after we allowed these visits. The bond between Ryan and Grace sparked intense debate in the wildlife conservation community. Some argued for Grace to be relocated to ensure she didn't become too habituated to humans, while others saw the relationship as an opportunity to study and understand interspecies connections. But it was Officer Daniel Morrison who perhaps understood the situation best. In the months following the rescue, he found himself returning to that spot in the forest, often encountering Grace during his patrols. Some things can't be explained by science, he would later write in his official report. Sometimes, you just have to accept that there's more to this world than we understand. The town of Pine Hollow embraced the story wholeheartedly. Local artist Maria Vasquez proposed a mural on the side of the town hall, depicting Grace leading Officer Morrison through the forest. The image captured not just the events of that morning, but something deeper. A moment when the artificial boundaries between human and animal dissolved in the face of compassion. Ryan, once recovered enough to walk with a cane, decided not to return to England. Instead, he purchased a small cabin on the outskirts of Pine Hollow, retrofitting it to accommodate his ongoing recovery needs. The property bordered the national forest, and it wasn't uncommon for residents to spot Grace patrolling the perimeter, maintaining her vigil over the man she had saved. People ask me why I stayed, Ryan explained during a local television interview 6 months after his rescue. They think it's crazy to uproot my life for a wild animal. But Grace didn't just save my life. She showed me something about what it means to be alive. How can you walk away from a lesson like that? The story had far-reaching implications for wildlife conservation efforts in the region. The Pine Hollow Wildlife Cooperation Initiative was established, focusing on studying and protecting the delicate balance between human communities and wild spaces. The program, funded by a combination of government grants and private donations, emphasized education and conservation while using Ryan and Grace's story as a testament to the complexity of wildlife behavior. Officer Morrison found himself becoming an unexpected advocate for wildlife protection. His experience with Grace led him to pursue additional training in wildlife management, and he began working closely with local schools to educate children about respecting and protecting local wildlife. The thing about Grace, he would tell the wide-eyed students, is that she reminded us that courage and compassion aren't uniquely human traits. Sometimes, the greatest acts of heroism come from the most unexpected sources. As seasons changed and years passed, the legend of Grace grew, but the reality was even more remarkable. She remained a wild animal, never fully domesticated. Yet she had forged a connection that transcended natural boundaries. Wildlife cameras placed around Ryan's property captured fascinating footage of her behavior. How she would chase away other predators from the area, how she would leave small gifts of freshly caught prey on his porch during harsh winters, how she would appear like a guardian angel whenever Ryan ventured too far into the forest alone. Dr. Matthews continued her studies of Grace, publishing several papers on what she termed adaptive empathy in wild felids. Her research suggested that Grace's behavior, while extraordinary, might indicate previously unknown capabilities in wild animals to form complex emotional bonds beyond their species. What we're seeing with Grace, Dr. Matthews wrote, isn't just an isolated incident of unusual animal behavior. It's a window into the sophisticated emotional lives of wildlife. And perhaps more importantly, it's a reminder of how much we still have to learn about the creatures we share this planet with. 5 years after the rescue, Pine Hollow had become something of a pilgrimage site for wildlife enthusiasts and those fascinated by the story of the bobcat who saved a man's life. The town handled the attention with careful consideration for both Grace and the local wildlife population, using the interest to promote conservation awareness rather than tourism. Ryan, now fully recovered save for a slight limp in cold weather, had become an integral part of the community. He worked as a consultant for the Wildlife Cooperation Initiative, sharing his story while advocating for responsible wildlife management practices. His cabin, initially a simple refuge, had evolved into a small research station where scientists could study local wildlife behavior patterns. Grace, too, had aged, her once juvenile features maturing into those of a full-grown bobcat. She had her own offspring now, 2 generations of kits that seemed to inherit their mother's unusual tolerance for human presence, though none showed quite the same remarkable behavior as Grace herself. On cool mornings, residents of Pine Hollow might catch sight of a familiar scene. A man walking with a slight limp along the forest edge, a magnificent bobcat moving like a shadow nearby, their unlikely friendship a living testament to the extraordinary capabilities of the wild heart. The mural on the town hall had weathered and been restored twice, but its message remained clear and powerful. It showed not just a rescue, but a moment of transformation. A reminder that sometimes the most profound connections come without words, without explanation, guided only by the mysterious wisdom of the natural world. Officer Daniel Morrison, now nearing retirement, often parked his patrol car near the spot where he first encountered Grace. You know, he would tell new officers during their training, our job isn't just about enforcing laws. Sometimes it's about being willing to believe in something extraordinary, about having the courage to follow when nature tries to tell us something important. The story of Grace and Ryan became more than just a tale of survival. It became a reminder of the complex web of life that connects all living beings, a testament to the capacity for compassion that exists beyond the boundaries of species. In a world often divided by artificial barriers, their bond stood as proof that the most profound connections can transcend all conventional understanding. As the sun set over Pine Hollow each evening, casting long shadows through the forest where this remarkable story began, Grace would often be seen sitting at the edge of the trees, her presence a living bridge between the wild and the civilized, between what we think we know and what we have yet to learn about the capacity for love and courage in all its forms. The pendant that Ryan had once tied around Grace's neck now hung in a display case in the Pine Hollow Museum, alongside photographs and documentation of their extraordinary story. But the real testament to their connection lived on in the daily rhythm of their continued bond. A wild bobcat who chose to be a guardian, and a man who found his home in the very wilderness that had nearly claimed his life. Their story became a reminder that sometimes the most profound truths come not from what we can explain, but from what we can only observe and accept with wonder. That in the vast tapestry of life, love and loyalty know no bounds, and heroes can emerge from the most unexpected corners of our world. In the end, the tale of the baby bobcat who wouldn't stop following an officer became much more than a headline. It became a testament to the enduring power of compassion, a reminder that in our increasingly complex world, the simplest acts of kindness can bridge the greatest divides, and that sometimes, the most extraordinary stories are the ones that defy our every expectation of what is possible.